You don't realize it, but right now your mind might not be entirely your own. Somewhere inside your brain, buried between memories, impulses, and emotions, something microscopic may be quietly rewriting you. Not dramatically, not violently, just enough to shift the way you react to fear, the way you perceive risk, the way you trust people, or even the way you make decisions. And the most disturbing part? You would never know it happened. Because the organism doing all this doesn't roar, doesn't crawl, doesn't leave scars. It lives in silence. It hides in brain tissue. And it has already infected millions of people across the world. Yet almost no one ever thinks about it. Today you will. This story doesn't begin with humans, it begins with rats. For centuries, rats have survived by mastering one simple instinct: avoid cats at all costs. The smell of a cat is supposed to trigger immediate panic. It's a hardwired survival alarm that evolution has carved into their species. But one day, scientists found something that made no sense. They noticed lab rats behaving almost fearlessly around cat scent. Instead of running, they walked toward it, some even exploring the area as if the smell attracted them. It wasn't confusion. It wasn't disease. It was something else completely. Inside their brains, researchers discovered tiny cysts left by a parasite called Toxoplasma gondii. A microscopic organism so intelligent, so specialized, that it doesn't just infect the body, it infiltrates the brain and reprograms behavior. The parasite's goal is chillingly simple: force the rat to be eaten. Because the only place this organism can reproduce is inside a cat's stomach. So it manipulates the rat's fear response, flips survival instincts, and transforms a scared prey into a willing sacrifice. The rat thinks it's making its own choices. But something else is whispering beneath those choices, guiding it toward danger. If this sounds like science fiction, it isn't. It's peer-reviewed, replicated, documented neuroscience. A parasite, smaller than a grain of dust, can edit the basic emotional circuits of a living creature. But this is where the story turns dark. Because humans get infected too. In fact, studies estimate that over 30% of the world's population may carry this parasite in some form. That means the odds it has reached you are far from impossible. Humans usually get infected through contaminated soil, unwashed vegetables, raw meat, and yes, sometimes through cats. Once inside, the parasite spreads through the bloodstream before settling into the brain. Not to control you completely. It doesn't need to get you eaten by a lion. But it still forms cysts in neural tissue, and those cysts still influence neurotransmitters. Subtle changes. Powerful consequences. When scientists compared infected and non-infected individuals, patterns began to emerge, patterns too consistent to ignore. Men with the parasite tend to take more risks, more impulsive actions, more aggressive responses, sometimes even higher rates of traffic accidents. Women, on the other hand, often show increased sociability, trust, openness, and emotional warmth. These aren't dramatic personality changes, they're slight shifts. But slight shifts matter when they accumulate across millions of people. Imagine something influencing the dial of your personality by just 5%. Not enough to notice, but enough to push behavior a little more in one direction. Enough to alter choices, preferences, reactions. Enough to shape identity. To understand how this happens, researchers scanned the brains of infected individuals. They found changes in dopamine regulation, the chemical primarily responsible for reward, motivation, risk-taking, and addiction. That means a parasite isn't just sitting in the brain. It's adjusting the chemical balances that help determine who you are. When dopamine shifts, everything shifts. How quickly you trust people. How strongly you respond to danger. Whether you act calmly or recklessly in stressful moments. You may think your choices come from personality or experience, but what if something microscopic is nudging the steering wheel? The most chilling evidence came from traffic accident data. A large-scale study showed that people infected with toxoplasma were significantly more likely to be involved in severe car crashes, especially ones caused by risky behavior or slower reaction times. Another study found higher rates of entrepreneurial risk-taking among infected individuals. One found increased likelihood of being drawn to certain extreme sports. Another found unusual fear responses. None of these changes are dramatic enough to notice daily. But they are consistent enough to appear in statistics. It's like a shadow touching certain parts of human behavior without ever announcing itself. And this raises a disturbing question: if a parasite can influence personality, even slightly, how much of your identity is truly yours. We all grow up believing our thoughts belong solely to us. That our fears, habits, reactions, and preferences are shaped by experience, memory, and choice. But the existence of toxoplasma challenges that belief. Maybe we are not singular, isolated selves. Maybe we are ecosystems, shaped by genes, environment, biology, and sometimes organisms living quietly inside us. Some scientists have even started exploring connections between this parasite and certain mental health vulnerabilities, not as causes, but as contributing factors. A shift in dopamine, a small disturbance in emotional regulation, a tilt in risk-response patterns, these things can play subtle roles in mental conditions. It doesn't mean the parasite creates disorders. It means humans are more influenceable than we like to admit. The brain, as powerful as it is not a sealed fortress. It is an open environment, one where microscopic life can quietly participate. But despite all this, most infected people never feel anything wrong. They live normal lives with normal emotions. They don't become zombies or different versions of themselves. They simply become slightly altered. And the unsettling part is the idea itself, not the infection. Because it forces us to confront the uncomfortable truth that identity may not be as solid as we think. Your personality might not be a sculpture carved once, it might be a river, shaped by every influence passing through it, including invisible ones. Yet there is a fascinating side to this. Influence goes both ways. Something that nudges sociability might make someone kinder, more trusting, more connected. Something that increases risk-taking might push someone to become bolder, more ambitious, less anxious. It's not a villainous parasite, it's simply a biological force with its own agenda. One that unintentionally touches the emotional and psychological systems humans rely on every day. And this invites a bigger question: if a parasite can influence behavior, how many other invisible forces shape the human mind? Every human emotion, anger, love, fear, trust, is a chemical pattern. Change the chemicals, even slightly, and you change the emotion. Change the emotion, and you change the decision. Change the decision, and you change the person over time. When you realize this, the parasite's power becomes less about manipulation and more about exposure. It exposes the fragile nature of personality. The human brain feels absolute, but it is extremely adjustable. A microscopic organism altering neurotransmitters reminds us just how delicate our inner world truly is. As we explore deeper into this mystery, one thing becomes clear: the parasite is not here to hurt us. It's not evil. It's simply following its evolutionary programming. But in doing so, it forces humanity to confront the uncomfortable possibility that who we are is partly biological, and partly shaped by invisible passengers we don't even know we're carrying. And that thought, more than the parasite itself, is what makes this story truly unsettling. As scientists continued studying infected individuals over the years, another strange pattern emerged, one that pushed this story from unsettling to deeply thought-provoking. When researchers compared personality profiles of thousands of people across different countries, cultures, and age groups, they found that toxoplasma didn't just alter behavior on the individual level. It seemed to influence entire populations in subtle, consistent ways. Countries with higher infection rates, for example, tended to score differently on national personality averages: higher cautiousness in some, higher impulsiveness in others, slight changes in cultural attitudes toward risk-taking, social bonding, and even group dynamics. It wasn't mind control, but it was a kind of quiet shaping, like wind slowly carving patterns into stone over centuries. And this hinted at something far more profound: parasites might not only influence people, they might influence societies. But the most disturbing findings appeared when researchers looked at real human lives, not statistics. One case involved a man who survived a severe car accident that doctors later linked to delayed reaction time, a known effect of toxoplasma. He wasn't reckless, he wasn't speeding, he simply didn't respond quickly enough in a dangerous moment. Another study found that infected individuals had a higher tendency to feel drawn to rewarding danger, extreme sports, risky financial decisions, high-stakes gambling. It didn't make them thrill-seekers overnight, but if a person stood on the edge between caution and boldness, the parasite sometimes pushed them slightly toward boldness. And boldness, depending on the situation, can lead to opportunity, or disaster. Then came the strangest twist of all. In some studies, infected individuals scored slightly higher in traits like warmth, sociability, and emotional expressiveness. That means a parasite can make someone gently more trusting, more open to connection, more willing to talk. Think about how strange that is, one microscopic organism nudging the social fabric of millions of people, one tiny shift at a time. It raises a disturbing philosophical question: if a parasite can push personality traits, even a little, how many global trends in human behavior might be shaped by forces we never notice? To understand just how invasive this influence can be, we have to look inside the brain itself. When scientists examined neural tissue from infected hosts, they didn't find chaos or destruction. They found precision. The parasite forms tiny cysts in specific brain regions, ones associated with fear, decision-making, and reward. Then it subtly adjusts dopamine and glutamate flow, the chemicals responsible for drive, fear responses, and emotional processing. These are the same chemicals targeted by psychiatric medications, which means a parasite is essentially playing with the same emotional dials that modern medicine manipulates to treat anxiety, depression, addiction, or PTSD. The difference? The parasite does it quietly, slowly, and without your permission. This opens an even more haunting possibility. Could parasites like Toxoplasma have influenced human evolution? Think about early human history. Survival depended heavily on risk-taking, exploration, social bonding, and group cooperation. Tiny nudges in behavior, more bravery, less fear, more trust, could change the direction of a tribe, a migration, even the outcome of conflict. Some scientists propose that parasites may have indirectly shaped patterns of early human behavior. Not intentionally. Not consciously. But evolution doesn't care about intentions. It only cares about consequences. And if infected individuals were slightly more adventurous, slightly more social, slightly more likely to take bold risks that led to new discoveries, then parasites may have acted as invisible collaborators in the story of our species. This line of research led scientists to wonder, if one parasite can do this, how many others might be influencing us too? In recent years, researchers have uncovered fungal spores that alter insect behavior, viruses that change aggression in animals, bacteria that affect mood, and even gut microbes that influence anxiety. One study found that gut bacteria produce chemicals identical to neurotransmitters used by the brain, sending signals through the vagus nerve that alter emotional states. Some bacteria reduce anxiety. Some increase it. Some influence appetite, cravings, even risk-taking. That means your mood may be shaped not only by your life experiences, but by trillions of microbes living inside your digestive system. In other words, human personality might not be a solo performance, it might be a negotiation between the brain and the organisms inside it. But among all known parasites, Toxoplasma remains the most fascinating because its influence is subtle, consistent, and widespread. And while most people infected never experience major symptoms, there's something psychologically unsettling about the idea that invisible organisms can quietly shape thoughts and feelings. It forces us to confront the fragility of perception. You may believe you're fully in control of your fears, your confidence, your impulses. But what if that control is shared? What if small biological forces, unnoticed and uninvited, fine-tune your emotional world from the shadows? Yet this story isn't meant to create fear, it's meant to reveal a hidden truth about human nature. We are not isolated beings. We are ecosystems, carrying more non-human cells than human ones. We are influenced by hormones, microbes, environment, stress, sleep, diet, genetics, chemicals, and yes, even parasites. This doesn't make us weaker. It makes us more complex. The human mind is not a fortress with thick walls. It's a living landscape with open borders. And sometimes, something microscopic walks through those borders and leaves faint footprints in our behavior. But here's the twist that turns this story from disturbing to profound. In all the studies conducted on infected individuals, one thing remains consistent: no parasite ever fully controls a human. Humans have something rats don't: massive cognitive override. We can reflect on our emotions, question our impulses, examine our thoughts, and redirect our actions. Even if a parasite nudges a feeling, it cannot control the decision built on that feeling. You may feel a stronger rush of excitement at a risk, but your reasoning mind still evaluates the danger. You may become slightly more social or more cautious, but your choices still belong to you. The parasite influences the feeling, not the final decision. That distinction matters. It means the parasite isn't stealing free will, it's merely adding noise to the system. Yet the fact that such noise exists is important. It reminds us that we should be cautious in assuming every emotion is pure, that every impulse is absolute truth. When you feel a sudden urge, a sudden fear, a sudden boldness, it might be biological. It might be psychological. It might even be microbial. The human brain is influenced by countless factors you will never see. But the beauty of consciousness is that you don't need to see them, you only need to notice yourself. Self-reflection is the ultimate defense. No parasite can override awareness. And that brings us to the final, most haunting idea in this entire story. The parasite doesn't need to rewrite your entire personality to influence your life. It only needs to shift one fear, one desire, one impulse, at the right moment. Many of the biggest decisions in life come from small emotional pushes. The moment you say yes to an opportunity. The moment you avoid a risk. The moment you trust someone. The moment you walk away from something dangerous or towards something meaningful. The parasite doesn't control these moments. But it adds pressure. A gentle tilt. A slight weight on the scale. And when millions of people carry that subtle tilt, the world itself shifts with them. So the next time you make a sudden decision, feel an unexpected emotion, or sense a strange boldness where there used to be fear, you might wonder for a moment, was that me? Or was something microscopic simply passing through, brushing against the strings that pull your emotions, not to manipulate you, not to harm you, but because in the grand biological story of our planet, humans are not the only creatures that shape minds. Sometimes, the smallest ones do too. And maybe the real mystery isn't the parasite itself, but what it reveals about us. Our brains are powerful, but not perfect. Our personalities feel solid, but they are fluid. We think we're in total control, yet we are always in conversation with biology. And perhaps acknowledging that truth doesn't make us less human, maybe it makes us more human than ever.